All right. Good girl. All right. Welcome to HortTube. My name is Jim Putnam. This is the Sunday garden question and answer video that I do most Sundays, but next Sunday will be the subscriber Sunday video where subscribers send in photos of things in their garden that they're proud of. The email address for sending in photos is right here. I need to say this every month. Make sure you turn your phone sideways if you're taking photos with your phone, because YouTube is a widescreen format. And if you take an up and down photo with your phone, it will not fill up the screen on YouTube. Also, if you try to send like seven photos in one email, the email shrinks the photos way down and they don't fill up the screen. Like I'll put it's like a postage stamp size photo, even if it was a big photo when you took it, that the email will do that. So just send one good photo, and if you take it in the morning or take it in the evening, typically the photos turn out a bit better than they do in the harsh sunlight in the middle of the day. So send one great one and turn it sideways. I want to review that each month because I want to show off your gardens as best as possible. So there was a tour video here in the garden this past week. I put up the video with the fountain going in this week, and something else. I think I put up one of Ram's videos from her beautiful garden down in Athens, Georgia. I still have one more video from that trip I took back in April. And Holly's back here drinking water out of the little bird bath I have on the ground over there. I was like, what is that noise? And then, okay, so this next week, I'm shooting a video with Tony Avent about licorice or hurricane lilies, surprise lilies. I can't wait to do that video. We've talked about it all year long, and they're in full bloom down at the garden right now. And it's just one of my absolute favorite times of year to see the surprise lilies come up out of the blue. And Tony is a real expert on this, on licorice. So that should be fun. One other thing. If you go to the J.C. Ralston YouTube homepage, they put up a video with me this week. I shot a video with Mark over at the garden, and it was a lot of questions about me and how I got started on YouTube and that kind of thing. So if that doesn't interest you, pass it by. But it's about a 45-minute video. He's asking some of my favorite things and that kind of thing. And we just a back and forth discussion we did over at the Ralston for their channel this week. But it's there if you would like to watch it. So let's get started on some questions from this past week. I'm actually shooting this on Sunday morning, which I never do. I wrote the questions down at the end of the week, but NC State's campus is back like other campuses across the country, and there are parties, just surrounding me the last 2 days. Every single time I've gotten to shoot this video for the last few days, there's music everywhere. So Sunday morning, they're very quiet. I should launch my music back in there, on Sunday mornings, which I don't mind them. I don't mind them doing their back to school parties. It's not a big deal, but I'm actually shooting this right before you're about to see it. So hopefully it goes well and it doesn't end up being the middle of the afternoon when I put it up. Okay, let's see. Somebody said their green giant Arborvitae are turning, have some yellow branches on them, and they suspect they were planted too deep. They are in an elevated area, so overall they're not holding water, but they suspect maybe they were planted a little too deep. That yellowing branching on Arborvitae is just a terrible indicator of what it's actually wrong, because it could be under or overwatering, and I would suspect most folks are not getting, unless you're getting, flooding rains. I would lean toward they were probably dry during this summer. I've dug holes over here, even with some of the rain we've gotten recently here. The vine, the Bignonia vine that I planted in a video this week, the soil was bone dry, absolutely bone dry. And we've had some rain recently, but the soil is still, it's quite dry. So I would lean toward them probably were dry during this period of time. But if you suspect that they were planted too deep, if they're very large ones and you can't do anything about it, you can go back, right at the base of them and try to pull back a little bit of the soil and just get it down to where the original planted depth was in the container, or field grown if they were balled and burlapped. You can go back and try to rake some of that back. There's not a whole lot that you can do about it if they're very, very large. If they're newly planted and you think they were planted too deep, This fall, you pop them out of the ground and you just raise them up. I got another question coming on that in just a second. Somebody asked about moving an established Japanese maple in Oklahoma. This is, you know, your landscape can change on a dime. And so this person had this beautiful Japanese maple in the shaded area, and then had a big giant ice storm a couple years ago in Oklahoma City, if you guys remember that, you know, Oklahoma ice storm. I guess maybe that was 3 years ago. Gosh, I don't remember. 2 or 3 years ago. And took out the shade for the Japanese maple. It did okay last summer. This summer it's really suffered, and wanted to know about moving it. I would move it in the winter when it's dormant, and go ahead. You can go ahead as the nights get cooler sometime in September. You can go ahead and root prune it. And I put up a video on that, how to prepare a plant to move. I think you could probably search it that way on the channel. And all I did was literally walk a circle around a camellia and cut the roots to prepare it to move. And then a few months after that, I actually moved it. And there's a video attached to it of actually moving the camellia as well. But I do prep plants in the ground to move that I'm nervous about moving. I cut the roots in the ground, and I let them kind of reestablish themselves as that being the new normal for them. It'll be a pancake coming out of the ground, so you want to dig wide, you know, wide as you can, and it won't be as deep as you think. It'll be deeper toward the middle under the tree for sure, but you want to dig a pancake that's a little wider at the middle of the bottom. Let's see, how to lift plants that were planted too deep was another question. They have an azalea and a gardenia that have really struggled, and they were definitely planted too deep. Plants that have struggled like that from being misplanted, or they're too wet, or they're too dry, or they're too whatever, if they've struggled for a while, they probably haven't rooted in much. I think you're going to find that you can put a shovel in there and just pop them out. I've lifted plants out of the ground that look like they just came out of the container. They've been in the ground for years because the area was too wet that they were in, or they were planted too deep. If the plant struggled on the top, the roots have struggled down below. So it won't be that big of a deal to put a shovel under them and, you know, pull back on it, pop it up, tuck some new soil under it, or, you know, move it to a new area, whatever you're doing with them. But it won't be as hard as you think it will be, but just because they're struggling on the bottom as well. Let's see. Somebody was asking, they're in zone 9 and wanted a large shrub for the shade. And they're in zone 9A. I think it was Florida. Definitely camellias, you know, are going to be good choices for you. And then Localized, which is a native, and Alyssium, those are natives. Yopon holly, that's another native. So there's 3 that would go in the shade that are natives. Wax myrtles, there's 4. Just popped in my mind. And then camellias are non-native, but good for the shade for zone 9A. Let's see. Somebody asked about talking about using evergreen shrubs for year-round interest. I'm probably going to do the opposite of the question. I think it's obvious that having a few evergreen plants in the landscape, or blue foliage plants that keep their leaves, or chartreuse plants that keep their leaves, or purple, you know, or conifers that have some sort of winter interest where they may turn a bronzy color or a bluish color. All of those things are going to add winter interest. I also think that having things like grasses where you don't cut them back, ornamental grasses where you leave them up, are quite beautiful in the wintertime. Leaving some of your flowering perennials and allowing the birds to take the seeds in the wintertime add interest to the winter garden as well. I just think there's some things that are undervalued on winter gardening. There's some trees that are tardily deciduous, meaning they keep some of their leaves throughout the winter, that can be interesting, like beech. You know, a beech tree will do that. Then there are plants that have beautiful stems in the wintertime, and that can be, you know, a red twig dogwood, or some sort of gold twigged Japanese maple, or yellow twigged Japanese maple. So you can think of winter interest in a lot of different ways. What are you doing back there? Are you right behind me? I have a conversation with you about not going into the beds, and then you're literally standing in the bed right behind me. Holly, how'd you even get in there? There's 800 bees back there. Come here. Come on. Come here. Oh, you're gonna go right out of there. Okay, that's a good call. That seems like a good call. Okay, all right, so stay out of the beds. That's the whole point. You're gonna get, there's a lot of bees back there doing the good work. Okay, so that's it. I mean, on winter interest in the garden can be a lot of things other than just having meatballs that don't change in the wintertime. Although having a few meatballs that don't change in the wintertime is definitely good for winter interest. But for me, I'm not very drawn to a landscape that's just meatballs with the intention that they look exactly the same in January as they do in July. You know, I'm more drawn to a garden that has winter interest because it was, you know, it was thought about in the planning process of this is going to do something special in the wintertime. You know, and it's going to be exposed. Maybe it's a weeping tree that you buy, like this one, that's just as beautiful in the wintertime as it is in the summer, even though it doesn't have leaves. Because now the stem is exposed and all the architecture of the tree is exposed. You know, that's like a weeping Japanese maple. So again, a lot of ways to achieve winter interest differently than just green round balls. Okay, let's see. Somebody asked me what mulch to use in Florida. They've got subterranean termites. Don't want to use things like wood chips. You know, the reason I wrote this question down was I'm guessing you can get pine straw down there. It's probably actually your best bet. But Holly, no ma'am, no ma'am, no ma'am. You're being a distraction to the video right now. She's laying down here below me now and she's licking the dew off the grass. It's rather distracting. I wrote this question down because I think that I need to say more often that you guys can use your county extension agent to ask some of the questions that are very specific to your area. So if you have a very specific question about an insect or a native plant or something that's, you know, again, very specific to your area, you're in an area that you get no summer rain whatsoever, or because I do get summer rain, or you get winters with, you know, that are -20, and that's not, you know, and you're looking for information just really based on something that's unique about your area. Maybe it's super windy in the wintertime, that kind of thing. I would use your county extension agent. Pretty much every county in the country has one, and ask those kinds of questions because they will have experience with similar things and similar questions in your area. But definitely take advantage of that. The North Carolina extension is run out of North Carolina State University, and so we have 100 counties in North Carolina. Somebody divided that up with a good number, and each county has an extension agent, and they're all employed through the North Carolina Cooperative Extension right here on campus. So it's great. Each of those county people are getting questions from farmers, home gardeners, you know, whatever. Usually the county dietitian is part of that group, and you know, there's a lot of questions that can be answered that are very local, you know, localized questions. So take advantage of that wherever you live. Let's see. Woodland area okay, so somebody asked about clearing a woodland area for new planting. They just have a lot of brush that they're cutting out. You know, you want to be careful. You know, when I answer these questions, I'm always you're going to get poison ivy as one of the responses down at the bottom. So make sure you're not seeing poison ivy and stuff out there. And then, you know, I'll go through and just cut that stuff off down to the ground with some, with heavier tools, or use a weed eater that you can put a blade attachment on a lot of weed eaters, and you can cut the stuff off with that. Just goggles, you know, make sure you're, you know, protecting yourself, wearing long pants, that kind of thing. But it's one of those things you just got to go in there and attack, whether it be with a machete or, you know, loppers, or, you know, again, some sort of gas-powered machine. Just cut the stuff down to the ground, and then when they try to come back, you can choose to either at that point where you cut them to the ground, you know, you can cover the area in cardboard. If it's larger material, you know, larger caliper things, they're probably going to try to poke back up, and you can choose to spray them at that point, or, you know, again, keep them covered, cut them down. Once you do it a few times, you know, you have to fight it less and less to tame an area. Part of the conversation I had with Mark the other day is he has a similar wooded space in his home garden, and I did a video at his home garden he's been clearing the underbrush in that area, but not all at once. And so you don't have to think about necessarily going in and saying, oh, I got a ½ acre of underbrush that I'd like to clear out. You could just take a small section out, claim it, do some planting in it, do some interesting things that you're trying to do, whatever the project is you're trying to do, and then move back in there over the years. Don't necessarily have to think about these projects as, oh my gosh, because sometimes that can just handicap you in not being able to move forward with something because it seems so daunting. But divide it into pieces if it is large and daunting, and you'll find that those projects, that's why I have those one-day landscape project videos on the channel. It's just showing that you can just take one little section and just look at it and then think about what you want to do with that section, how you ultimately want it to turn out, and then tackle that one Saturday and Sunday as a couple or an individual, and then move to another block and another block. And you'll find it much less daunting to do it that way. Let's see, somebody said they heard to throw away trimmings to avoid bugs in their landscape. I guess their material they're pruning off. But now they're hearing about compost in place theory and chop and drop. People have names for things that I and other gardeners have been doing forever, which is literally, I cut a perennial for the video, or I cut the annual celosia in the video, putting the fountain back here to bring the level of the annuals down, and I need to do it a little more actually. But I just dropped that material right on the ground. It's now composting in place. So that's the way I've always done it. And I showed that at the old house. My Japanese ligustrum, and my screen at the old house was hollies and Japanese ligustrum, and it was a mix of screening plants. When I pruned those, all that material just became the mulch for those plants. And so unless a plant is diseased, there's really no reason to take the leaves away. So you might have a lot of spotting on your hydrangea macrophyllus this time of year. When those leaves fall off, I would clean those up and get rid of them. But things that are healthy, there's really no reason to at all. And are you going to get more bugs? What you're actually going to get is what I had last year, leaving the leaves on the ground, is a lot more birds. I had the robins out here flipping every leaf over every day, looking for food, and so they did a pretty good job of keeping the insects down for me out here during the winter, and harmful insects that would have hidden under that barrier and that protected space. The robins did a pretty good job of taking care of, but not all things can ever be completely perfect. Maybe leaving some of that stuff on the ground gives a hiding place for some sort of bad insect of some kind. I don't know, but I've always done the chop and drop, or whatever people want to call it now. It's probably lazy man's landscaping. That's probably what it actually should be called, because frequently I just have a handful of limbs and I go and I pull back a branch and I just throw them under something and let them compost in place, because it's just easier, honestly, than finding a place for it. And definitely I don't want to put it in a can and have the city drive diesel fuel out of a truck, which is literally what everyone does, and take it somewhere and then compost it, and then people buy it and they're just leave it on your property and use it to improve your soil. Anyway, let's see. Somebody bought a $10 crabapple tree from Lowe's, and it has suckers on it, and it's super leggy. This is, I talked about that when I put that vine in the other day that I got it's a clearance plant from Lowe's. It was $19.98, and it was just half price for $10, and it was literally the bignonia I was going to buy for that space over there, just to kind of cover up that building that's not painted in my neighbor's garden over there. That I talked about in that video, how to pick the things I would leave behind in the clearance area, and one of the things is flipping the plants over and examining the roots, because the roots are rotted. That plant's actually dead, even if it still looks kind of semi-okay on the top. That plant's on its way out, likely. One of the other things is something that's going to be just so much maintenance to get it back to what it looked like. And if it's got a lot of suckers and it's leggy, it's probably going to be years before you're going to get this thing in shape, but you can. So yeah, again, you're just going to cut the suckers off. Suckers are just, because the top was damaged in some way, new growth came up from the bottom. The tree is just trying to save itself. It thinks it's dying and is trying to make sure that it can save itself by putting up a new central leader. It did 7 of them at one time probably. So yeah, go ahead and cut those off. And then if it's leggy during the winter time, you can take a little bit of the growth off the top, but go ahead and plant it. But again, there are probably some plants that I would leave behind in these clearance spaces, especially the roots. Examine the roots. That's the main thing. It's not even about saving money. It's about, you're quite possibly introducing some sort of disease into your landscape, some sort of root rot issue into your landscape. So keep that in mind as well. When you're bringing something that's unhealthy back to the house, make sure it's unhealthy just because it ran out of fertilizer or it wasn't watered once or twice, but not because it actually had some sort of disease or insect problem. Okay, let's see. Is there research on trees? Oh, okay, so I talked about having the trees underplanted in the landscape last week, and I've talked about this many times actually, about just not having a tree plop down in the middle of a front lawn with the sun, slamming the roots on all sides of it. It's just not a natural setting. They want to know if there's research on trees being longer lived with ground covers and mulch underneath them. No, but I mean, the woods back there are quite healthy. I've got a giant oak back there, and it's got ivy growing at the base of it, and just all kinds of things. And it seems healthier in general than the ones that are in folks' front gardens. That there's definitely some oak. This neighborhood's like 90 years old, and it looks like that's about the life expectancy of one of these giant white oaks in an urban setting. I think that the maple that was in the front garden here and the maple that's in the neighbor's garden, which is just a pain, honestly, the roots are all over into this side of the front property out here. Those are much shorter lived in urban spaces. Probably 2 decades or something like that. So those seem to be lengths of time just based on their urban spacing. The roots get out to sidewalks and houses and driveways, and then where do they go? And the top of the tree is, I'm literally looking at 1, 2, 3 houses down from me. That is it's a beautiful, beautiful tree. Had a large limb drop out last week and break their windshield. So I have a feeling that tree, is going to go. No, I don't think I don't think anybody's done research on whether or not having a tree out in the middle of a field versus a tree that has grown with understory plantings is longer lived. But these certainly look healthier back here than the ones that I see in people's gardens and yards, and that includes the ornamentals like dogwoods and everybody's favorite crepe myrtles and those kinds of things. A lot of them look pretty bad with given a little bit of age in spaces where they've just had turf growing up to the bottom of them in people's front gardens. So just a pointless observation from Jim. That's a good t-shirt right there, a pointless observation from Jim. Let's see, somebody that has a 2-year-old ligustrum wanted to know when they could start limbing it up. You could have started limbing it up the minute you put it in the ground. You're not gonna hurt that ligustrum. Here's a couple photos from this week. I was walking past a grate at a church over here, walking holly, and looked down in it, and here is a Japanese ligustrum. So that's growing down in a 15-foot hole in the ground in the middle of a church parking lot. So I think you can probably limb up your ligustrum whenever you want. Okay, so somebody has a vine maple planted too deep in Oregon. This is the theme of this. I don't even know that I was realizing this as I was writing the questions down. Acer circinatum vine maple. It's a native maple to the Pacific Northwest. It's one of the most beautiful, absolutely most beautiful, iconic maple leaf shapes. It's one of my just all-time favorite maples for sure, and a lot of people's as well. They have one that was planted too deep. I don't know how old it is, but certainly if you can't see the root flare at the bottom of it, then it likely has been planted too deep. Pay attention to that, guys, when you're looking at trees. If you can see, you should be able to see right before it enters the ground a little bit of what we call a root flare, right before it enters the ground. That's where the tree is actually attached to the roots that are down in the ground. If you're not seeing that, And I see it on just newly planted trees that go in the ground. So they were in 25-gallon container, and at some point it was probably field grown. It was dug out of a field, and then it was potted into that 25-gallon container. It was already planted too deep, just in the container itself. The caliper doesn't change, or the diameter of the stem, trunk doesn't change. It just goes right down into the soil. It was already planted too deep at some point. I don't know how big this one is, but it would be concerning to me, more concerning here probably. I know you guys are rainy in Oregon and Washington, but you do go times of the year where it's just bone dry as well. So, probably less concerning out there. But if you can go back and see how deep it actually is, you should be able to find it, how deep it is. If you're exposing the trunk of a tree 6 or 8 inches, trying to get down and find out where it was actually supposed to be planted, be careful with that wet spot that's been mulched, and soil's been up on it. You might want to put some sort of protection around it, a piece of burlap around it for a week or two. Let that area dry out without, the sun being on it, or just kind of slowly lower the soil around it so that you don't do damage by exposing, 8 inches of trunk that's been underwater for a while. So, be cautious with that, or put some containers around it or something like that for a little while it dries out and becomes acclimated to not being buried in the ground. Let's see. Okay, so this was a question. Somebody asked about pruning 20% off of plants for summer planting. They said that I had talked about pruning plants back when you're planting them in the summer just to slow the growth down. But it's definitely not 20%. That is all I want to do, and all I think I've ever talked about is just stopping the terminal growth on the plant. Let me grab a, okay. So this is a Weigela that happens to be, 5 feet tall over there. It's a gold foliage one. This stem was, 3 feet long. I just broke off just the terminal growth on it right here. But this is all you would need to take off of it. Even less than that. I could have just taken this off of it. All I'm trying to do, this is what's using the majority of the water, is this newest growth on it and using the most nutrients. And so when I'm talking about, I'm basically talking about pinching a plant when I'm planting it in the summer, not doing a hack job on it. So, I hope I haven't conveyed that, that I'm hacking plants back when I'm putting them in the ground in the summertime. All I'm doing is trying to stop that terminal growth, that very end tip growth on it. You'll be amazed. That's what we did at the nursery. When I had the nursery, I would have one group that, man, we were having to water 2 or 3 times a day. We were watering 10,000 plants in order to keep this one block of 200 watered. Because they were just drying out constantly, and I would just have somebody go and with some hedge shears and prune the tiniest bit off the ends of the branches of those plants, and it would immediately slow the water use down for that group. So that's where I've learned this technique, but it doesn't take a hack job. It just takes a very small amount of growth off the end of each branch. It doesn't have to be every branch either. I gotta be careful with my words sometimes. It doesn't have to be every branch, but some good portion of the terminal growth on some branches. Okay, somebody asked about snowball viburnum pruning. I couldn't remember, I think I answered this like 2 weeks ago, but after they flower. Somebody asked about growing onions in Raleigh. I don't like onions, and so you won't see me plant onions. I do plant garlic, which I'll plant again in the late winter, early spring is when when I do those, and I just do them in these annual borders where there's pansies and snapdragons and that kind of thing at that time. But you can start the seeds on onions in Raleigh in mid-February and then plant them out in the landscape right before your last frost or right around your last frost. They're pretty tough. We have a very short onion season here, so you'll be harvesting them by July, where people in northern areas can allow the bulbs to get a bit bigger before they're harvesting them. So we typically don't get as big of bulbs, but they're not that hard to grow in composted, kind of well-prepared soil. So this is one of those plants you'll take a fork and kind of break the soil up a bit, like you would for any root vegetable or bulbing vegetable like that. Let's see, somebody has, this was a good one because this brought me back to my landscape days training people. Somebody said, what do they do with the extra clay from planting because they're using amendments when they're planting, and wanted to know where to put it in the yard. I never have extra soil when I'm planting. I mound things up just a bit in my clay soils here, and that mounding up gives me the room for that little bit of shovel full of compost I might use or something like that. I think if you're getting to the point where you are bucketing clay off, then you're over amending the holes, and you need that clay going back into that hole. Some percentage of it, 50+% needs to be clay. Otherwise, you're digging a bowl where the water is going to run to and easily go into. So your plants can really be overwatered. But I had the same thing with my employees. Landscaping would always have, you know, like just buckets of things all over the place that didn't go back. You know, I'm trying, when I plant something, I'm trying to reuse all of the existing native soil, and then if I'm amending, it's just a shovel full of something. It's not enough that I would have to displace soil to do it. And at this point, because this ground's been covered for so long, you know, 2 years now, and all this material's breaking down, I'm not amending anything. It's just getting, when I pull back my mulch and I plant, the compost is just getting mixed in. So I don't have to think about it anymore. But if you're having to cart off extra clay, you're probably over amending the holes. Okay, in Jim's humble opinion. Okay, so last question for this week. Somebody has a fire chief Arborvitae, and all Arborvitae are super sensitive to dog pee. They just are. I don't know if Western Arborvitae, I don't want to say all, but definitely all the Eastern Arborvitaes are definitely super susceptible to being burned by dog pee. They wanted to know if they should dig the plant up and turn it around. They actually recover pretty quick from dog pee damage as well. And if you turn that bad side to the back and it may not get enough light, it may be slow to recover, and you're doubling down on stress. And I try to not double down on stress typically. So something like that. Another, just bringing up that bignonia vine again. That bignonia is just such a tough native plant that I went ahead and put it in the ground. But if I had something that off-colored that was a shrub, I might not have planted it in August just because it would have doubled down on the stress. I might have pulled that to the side, put a little liquid fertilizer on it to try to perk it up just a hair, not a lot, because I don't want to put a lot of new growth on it. I'm just trying to get it the nutrients it needs to green back up. And then I might have thrown it in the ground in like October when the nighttime temperatures were a little cooler and it would have been a little less stressful. So I try not to double down on stress. If the plant's stressed from the dog pee, then you dig it up and turn it. Again, you're doubling down on that. Plus, I would like to leave the spot that's damaged on the sunnier side because it'll be more likely to fill in. The funny part about that question is, and I didn't read it well, it was like, the dog is no longer a problem. And then it was like, comma, my son has moved, or something like that, then taking the dog. But it was, you know, the sentence when I read it, I missed the end part, and I was like, what'd you kill the dog? It was kind of a funny moment writing questions down the other day. So send photos to the HortTube@gmail.com address. Remember to turn your phone sideways and send just one good one, and show off your beautiful landscapes. Thank you guys for watching. And also ask gardening questions down below this video, and I'll be back in a couple weeks with one of those. Thanks for watching.